Welcome to Invisible Me, a podcast centred around invisible health issues and the feeling of not being seen and heard. Yet here I am, standing right in front of you. Does this sound familiar? Well, come join the conversation. Share your experiences. Let's break down those norms and attitudes for the better. This is a safe space to chat with me, Pat. Good evening. Welcome, Jodie. Lovely to see you.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Delighted to have you here. Jodie Hill from Thrive Law. We'll come back in a moment to your company and what you do and how special it is, because I think it's awesomely special, very unique, and hopefully trailblazing for others to follow in your wisdom. That's what I'll say. Jodie, we're going to talk a little bit about, of course, neurodivergence, being neurodiverse. I'm one of the gang, so I'm in there very much so in many elements, we'll say. I was late. I was 29 before I found out I was dyslexic and highly likely ADHD. Non-tested, but working on that this year. But I kind of don't need it because I know who I am and how I've navigated life and where I've got so far. However, it's very important, and the world is now much more and more inclined to use the word neurodiverse, and we're learning what that means, that umbrella of many things underneath. Jodie, could you tell me a little bit how it all began, how you knew you were different, or what's your journey to get you up to where you're working now?
Yeah. Of course. So actually quite a similar journey to you in the sense, I wasn't 29, I was 32 when I was diagnosed.
Oh, okay.
So I actually didn't know I was neurodivergent at school. And I think part of it is this piece around being a female that had pretty good grades, that was very amenable, did as I was told. Wasn't
Twins.
Yeah, literally. So it wasn't like the classic naughty boy in the school. So although I was predicted 3 A's and I ended up getting 2 B's and a C and going through clearing. And I did think it was I thought it was odd at the time because I'd always done really well. And
sure.
And the pressure around that time was really difficult. And I was also dealing with anxiety at the time. And I think, well, certainly since I was diagnosed, I've noticed a big difference in my mental health.
Yes.
So to give you a bit of context, so I'd set my firm up after having a mental breakdown, and it was only in the lockdown. So I set the firm up 7 years ago nearly.
Okay.
It was only in 2020 that when the whole world stopped and everyone's going, this is great, we can just not leave the house. And obviously it wasn't great that COVID happened, but as in people quite enjoyed the slowing down, didn't they? Everybody was like, oh, this is quite enjoyable. I never get to slow down. And I was like, I don't know how to slow down. And my brain is, I was like, am I having another breakdown? What's happening? And I just couldn't describe it. It was the weirdest feeling because I suppose I've created a life where I'm always on, I'm always fast paced.
I'm going to jump in there and add to you because I can relate.
Yeah.
And I explain to people, it's like a movie's running on my head all the time. It's like a film. It's just going on, pictures, thoughts all the time. And to me, I thought that was normal because I thought everybody else is like that. Are they not? Why aren't they like that? So I didn't realise I was different until I spoke to a member of my family, my brother, and he goes, Pat, I'm the same. And I'm going, oh my goodness. But yes, it's the slowing down is very odd. Even if we're sitting still or sitting, but our brain's not stopped. We're not stopped.
I think that's the hardest thing to describe to neurotypical people is when people, I watch people sit on a sofa and just sit. I watch people go to the cinema and not talk all the way through it and fidget and eat and move and have to go to the toilet 3 times. It's I love watching a film, but I can't do it without chatting, and people find it incredibly annoying. But if it's coming out, it's coming out. These are all these thoughts are going through my head, and then I start unpicking the film, and it wouldn't be like this and that. And did you notice that dressing gown wasn't worn in that way in the previous? And everyone's like, oh my God, well, you just watched the film. So this kind of came out in lockdown. I think it just highlighted it because my role as a lawyer very much requires me to travel a lot. I'm spinning a lot of plates. So actually the environment I've created works really well for me because I can flip between different types of tasks depending on the challenges of my neurodivergence at the time. So I think for me, if I was sat doing like the same task every day at a desk, I couldn't do it. It would be impossible. And I did used to work in a call center and have to do that. And I swear to God, I used to stare at the clock and be like, is this over? It's painful. I can't handle this monotony. So yeah, so lockdown really exacerbated that. And also I realized how much I valued exercise and being able to be outside.
Yes.
So this was part of my coping mechanism, is to exercise every day. That's how I expend some of the energy. I mean, even this morning, I go to the gym and my partner's like, it's 6 a.m. He's like, darling, I love how much energy you have, but honestly, it's 6 a.m. How are you skipping in? So yeah, it prompted me to take advice, because I was obviously quite concerned that I'd had a breakdown before. I knew it wasn't a breakdown, but I felt like for the first time I'm not normal, and I don't like saying the word normal, but I was like, what's going on? Something weird's happening.
Yes.
And it wasn't that something weird was happening. It's just that before I was in the right environment, and that environment was removed from me. And that highlighted all of the struggles that I'd always had, but had masked quite well and put very good coping mechanisms in place, being quite intellectual and having gone through a lot of therapy. So I went and got some support from a psychiatrist, and they diagnosed me with combined ADHD. So it's the hyperactive and the inattentive. And I don't know if you've spoke about medication before.
No, I haven't. And I would love to, if you could. Yes, no, I haven't spoken about medication. How people got diagnosis, the delay in getting diagnoses, these things we've touched on before. But no, actually the medication is one I don't know enough about, and the listeners probably won't either, so that would be awesome. Yes, come and watch a movie with me, because I'm excited.
We'll be like, what happened?
Nobody else. No, we have to book a private session. We have to have the room to ourselves.
Oh, brilliant.
But yeah, I completely get that. And being outside does calm me. Being around trees, I find woodlands and near water just works for me. It just calms my soul. But again, I need to be on my own, because if I was with somebody, I'd be going, oh, can you see that? I'd be talking about everything I'm seeing while I'm walking. So it has to be a solo thing for me to recharge. When you said you got your diagnosis, was it a physical test? Was it a GP? How did you get that definitive, you've got this combined?
So I went to a private psychiatrist on the basis that we were in lockdown. You couldn't get a GP appointment.
Correct.
It was impossible at the time. So as a friend of mine that I was talking to who'd been diagnosed earlier that year, I just said to him, like, who did you speak to? I've literally never come across this before, but this is what I've been recommended to do. And he recommended somebody, and effectively the process was online. I had an interview, my family did. So my mum, my brother, and my best friend. So 3 people that have known me since before I was 12. And at least 2 of those have to still know you like now, so that they can see whether the traits have been present throughout your life, basically. That's what they're looking at.
Amazing. I love that, because then that gives it genuineness and across a long period of time. It's just not a window in your life and ta-da, tick the box, you're that. So there's layers and the complexity and the depth of getting that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and you actually get a big report as well, which kind of explains so this is like a summary of what we discussed, and then it says, this is how the diagnostic criteria works. You need to have at least X amount of the criteria present since prior to, since being a child. And it has to also have a negative impact on your life. Like, you have to be able to demonstrate a struggle, because a lot of people will have traits, but they're not impacting their life in an adverse way. So they don't, it doesn't meet the criteria. And what I thought was quite helpful about the diagnostic process was that they're not just asking me, in my opinion, they're asking other people what they've observed in my behaviours over the years. And they also check as well whether you've had any childhood trauma, because sometimes people can be misdiagnosed as ADHD because they are presenting traits that are actually a reaction to a trauma. So they also assess that and see whether there is anything there, so that they're not misdiagnosing. So I don't know what other people go through in their diagnosis process, but for me, it was quite straightforward.
Good.
I was very privileged to be able to afford the private fees. This was before they rocketed up after lockdown. and you know, and then with that doctor then helps you with the medication as well. So they then talk you through, what do you want to do next? Here's your options.
Right.
And then kind of talks you through like the process in terms of going on to shared care with your GP to get your medication and all of that. So it's a bit of a process. It takes several months to go through, especially if you get meds, because it can take a while to find the right dosage.
That's what I was going to ask you, the different types, and find the one that works for you. Can I ask what it is? Is it a tablet version? Yes.
Yeah. So for me, what I'll kind of take it back a little bit, because when I had medication with anxiety, I really didn't get on with the medication.
Yes.
And I felt quite numb, and I had this kind of, I didn't have a reaction to it. It served a purpose when I was really bad with anxiety and panic attacks. But I just remember feeling like I want to get off this medication because it's making me feel not like me.
Yes.
So I kind of felt a little bit nervous, because I was like, well, you know, this is a big deal. This is like medication for the rest of your life. I mean, obviously you don't have to stay on for the rest of your life, but the idea is it's not for a period of anxiety or a period. It is part of who you are.
Yes, so to support you and live with you. It's going to live with you. It's not going to go away. So
it's part of the journey.
Yes.
Exactly. So my initial anxiety, so this is what was helpful to talk to the doctor about, the psychiatrist, that's what he specializes in. And I asked him, like, what are the various options? And he said, oh, well, you know, it's tablets that you take. You can take them at different intervals. So you can have short release, which can be like 2 or 3 hours. You can have up to 6 hours, or you can have one tablet a day.
Oh, right.
And it lasts all day. And I was just like, do you know what? I am so forgetful. I don't want to take a tablet every 2 hours because I'll forget.
Same.
So I did take the 13-hour slow release. So I take Elvance, which is, I take the highest dosage on 70 milligrams on the basis that we gradually worked up to that. And that felt like the right level for me.
Okay.
But what's interesting is because I was worried about the anxiety medication, it's very different. It's a stimulant. And I remember him saying to me, oh, it's a stimulant. I'm like, whoa, do not stimulate.
Don't add. Don't add more to what I already am.
Yeah, exactly. And it was really interesting, because what he explained to me was actually what it's doing is it's stimulating that part of your brain that's kind of going out and searching for dopamine. So it's helping you to stay focused on that basis, because it's allowing for that stimulation in the brain.
Okay.
So I thought, oh God, that's honestly, I never knew before that consultation that was the case.
Yes.
And actually I found it very, very helpful in terms of my work, my life. Like people describe me as being a lot calmer and a lot more measured. So less impulsive, less distractible in the room. But one thing I would say is it doesn't cure you. I'm not trying to cure myself. No. That's not what I'm trying to do.
It just aids you.
And I just
steers you a little bit. Yeah.
I feel like the light switch is on. So before it was like there was fog, and it's hard to get through all the time and work it out, and everything felt quite exhausting. The light switch is on now, and I feel a bit more like laser focused and able to be in the room present. I still experience all the traits, but I've experienced them to a lesser level, and there's still massive fluctuations. But overall, I'd say it reduced it by about 60%. Obviously, you can't put an exact figure on, but that's really what you notice the difference when you don't have it.
That is amazing. It's like a magic wand. As you said, it doesn't fix you, but it supports you. It helps you to steer daily life, and you can see a difference. And you mentioned it helps you focus and you're more productive. And people are noticing. So I'm really pleased. I'm pleased that you found that.
Yeah, me too. It's been a positive part of the journey. I think without the diagnosis, I wouldn't have got to that part.
Brilliant. No, I love a happy ending. I'm going to bring up a word. I've used it, but it is again, it's all about language and how we address things and just label things. And people say, we're not judgmental and never judge a book by its cover. We're human. We judge all the time. Let's be honest. we do. But the word is superpower. And I have said in the past, my dyslexia is my superpower, because I would go on to say, because it makes me the person I am. It gives me the drive, it gives me the push, it gives me the passion in everything I do. Because if I love something, I get excited about it. And I won't stop till I finish. I do complete tasks. And I say, no, my dyslexia, once I found out that's why I work the way I do, how I behave the way I do, how I think. It's my superpower. But I read something that a wise woman told me one day on social media. Jodie Hill says, and I quote, superpower. Well, basically, you were going on about how it's the language, it's how we look at it. And why should we say it's an add-on to me? It's actually really who you are. It's you. It's just who you are. Own it and don't add to it. You were also mentioning that I have ADHD, I have autism. People will say that. I say, I have dyslexia. But I should be saying it as, I am ADHD, I am autistic, because it's me. It's part of me. It's the whole of me. It's not like, oh, and then feel sorry for me. It's like almost you're giving people permission to make you different and see you different because whatever normal is.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell us a bit about that, because it was just wonderful.
It was recent, wasn't it? Yeah. Do you know, it sparked quite an interesting debate online. There's a lot of people going, oh, no one cares about whether you're ADHD or not, just shut up. Other people go, oh, well, I am not going to be my label. And other people say, well, I am ADHD because it's not going anywhere. It's
Correct.
part of who I am.
Yes.
It's not a disease that I've contracted. It's not an illness that I'm going to recover from. It's a neurodevelopmental condition that I am. I am, of course, people go, well, you can't be a disorder. And I get that. But the reality of the way that we have to be diagnosed for medication means that it's classed as a disorder. But I'm not saying I am a disorder. What I'm saying is I'm ADHD. It's part of how my brain is. I can't change that. It is what it is.
Well, my argument is you're born with it.
Exactly. So
it is you.
That's why I say it's identity first. Personally,
yes.
I prefer identity first language. Part of that is because that's me accepting who I am. And I think it's important that we respect people choosing person first or identity first language. But it also recognises for me that it's a core part of my identity and that I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed to say that I'm ADHD. I am proud to say that. And I'm also... it is a core part of me and I can't change it and I don't want to change it because I've learned to live with it.
Yes.
But I think ultimately a lot of people find that approach really empowering. But some people say, why are there all these labels? Why are we, putting these labels on people? That person isn't their condition. And then they emphasize the person first and then they have the condition, which again is absolutely fine, but it tends to be used more in a medical setting because people will say, I have ADHD as a diagnosis, whereas I'm looking as ADHD as an identity rather than saying the diagnosis. So, a similar thing works if you think about saying I'm neurodivergent, because you can be ADHD or neurodivergent without a diagnosis. You don't need a diagnosis. Yes. And I think that's the point, isn't it? It's the diagnosis helps you get the medication. You don't need the diagnosis otherwise.
Correct. I don't have that diagnosis, but apart from the dyslexia, it is about identity. But when the people are there is a big discussion, a debate out there everywhere. I think the people that are a wee bit negative or a bit come across a little bit angry or fed up with people saying I am this, I am that, it's a lack of education, and I mean that in the nicest way. They're ranting a little bit because they're not, and we are now being more outspoken and we're being heard, and it's everywhere. And I think it's lack of understanding, not actually stopping and trying to educate themselves about what they're talking about. So anyway, we are shouting about it. We won't be quiet.
on that point though, I would say, so what I thought was really interesting is people were quite happy to accept that you can say I am autistic.
Yes.
But people didn't want to agree with me that you can be ADHD. And I said, but they're both diagnosed in a very similar way.
Correct.
They both relate to neurodevelopmental condition. They're both neurodevelopmental conditions. So, but you've just put I am autistic, but I'm not ADHD. I have ADHD, and I was like, but do you understand what you've just said?
Yes.
You've used the verb to be.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it's really interesting because people are very accepting to say, oh, that person is autistic.
Yeah.
Like that flows off the tongue, doesn't it?
It's been heard longer. It's been around longer. It's the word's been there longer, and probably more visual. So you can see a human being walking down the street and you may be able to quickly say that person's autistic. So it's more visually, and then neurodivergent, the word's becoming more bantered around, and you don't see it instantly until you spend time with that person and you go, oh, okay. Maybe. I don't know. It's just,
I don't know.
It's just my opinion. Who knows?
I think it's hard because especially with all of this is hidden, isn't it? So like you say, a lot of it you don't see. Everything is hidden, but I think the way that the media has portrayed autism is that it's that person is autistic or I am autistic is quite commonly used.
Yes.
But I think with ADHD, it's a newer conversation and is probably less dramatized and stereotypically kind of spoken about in movies and things like that.
Yeah, I think we're 5 years yet before it's more mainstream. But can I commend, well, I am going to commend you, not can I will commend you on your career, your company, and how inclusive the entire staff, everything about Thrive Law. I would love to interview somebody in the company to tell me how awesome it is, because I wish I was in a place of work like that. I wish I had an employer like that. Because you mentioned earlier the boredom that we neurodiverse will have in certain jobs. I've had 10, 15, I haven't counted, I've probably had 20 jobs in my life so far because I get bored. And people frown at me and scorn me because, oh, what job are you doing now? Because I move. And so I last 5 or 6 years in a job, and then if I get bored, I'm going, my soul's destroyed. I can't bear this. I'm not getting up in the morning to be so miserable. So I do leave and I move on. And it's just my makeup is who I am. But I'm now at my 50-something. I'm now finding my wheelhouse. I'm finding my happiness. And I know it's been creative and it's been myself, my true self. So yeah, the employment is an issue. And you've tell me a little bit about Thrive Law and all the team, because it's awesome.
Yeah, so thank you for that. It's really kind. I mean, originally when I set Thrive up, obviously I didn't know I was neurodivergent. So I set up the firm wanting to create a psychologically safe place and an inclusive place for me, because I've had a mental breakdown. And I attracted people who shared those values, who happen to also be neurodivergent, which I didn't know. And we have grown the team to, there's about 20 of us across the UK now. And we operate a very flexible working environment of delivering HR, employment law and training support to organisations. But our difference is that, exactly to your point about being inclusive, is we're not just going to tell you how to sack that pregnant person or to sack that person who's got mental health, and we're going to help you support the human in that process, and we're going to help you be more inclusive, more accessible in your HR, your employment law. So really merging all of those things together, using lived experience from our variety of lawyers with lived experience, but also, having worked with hundreds of companies and represented hundreds of claimants in the claims, in their claims against organisations where people have got it wrong. It gives us such a wealth of knowledge, both breadth and depth, in terms of the legal, but also the personal side of having these types of conditions and the impact that it can have. And so what we do is, that's why we do the training and things like this. And what we do is we help build neuro-inclusive cultures. We help people be more mindful about how they can support neurodivergent individuals and other areas of inclusivity. But for me, it was it's kind of just grown in that way organically with my own diagnosis. And you mentioned about being authentic. And certainly for me, I have found that being my true self and being authentic and sharing how I feel, despite the people that then have a go at me online for it, it makes me feel like me. And I feel for the first time in my life where I'm not struggling with my mental health, like being able to run my company and do the good that I do in not just with my team, but with my clients. And we're trying to change the law at the moment as well. So there's all these things that are serving to create, I suppose, positive change.
Yes.
That for me has been really important in terms of my mental health, because knowing about my diagnosis, creating the right environment, I've not had any sick days in 7 years.
Woohoo!
No, guess what? So it's like, actually all of that, people assume, you have this diagnosis, now you're this poor disabled person.
Yeah.
I do class myself as disabled. I do have a disability. However, I have found a way to work with it rather than against it.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important that people see the positive side, because you shouldn't just be written off because you're neurodivergent or you have a hidden disability. Actually, you have so many different attributes. You're just not going to fit that square peg into the round hole. You have to find a way to do things.
Yeah. And this is where you said change in law, government, the people that can have the power to change these things. It's education in schools. It's one doesn't fit all. And there are so many neurodivergent young people and students and all other workers across that are struggling because of this fitting into the square box. It's hard. So changing the law and recognising the value of the person sitting in front of you.
Yeah.
I mean, I am very aware of places like business networking and platforms like LinkedIn. They specifically, actually, some companies look for neurodivergent staff because how we think outside the box, how we have layers of thinking and how we approach different aspects of the particular job that they're advertising for. They actually seek out neurodivergent because we will bring that extra layer of pizzazz, magic to the company. So,
right? Like, that's what you're doing. Is like, because our brains are wired differently, we are approaching every situation differently. So I just think, as a lawyer, wouldn't you rather have a neurodivergent lawyer that's going to think differently to your opponent and think around this stereotypical route
all day long?
Argument?
Yes, all day long, 100%. Well, I'm going to let you get on with the rest of your evening. We've only scratched the surface. But no, thank you for just being your true authentic self, talking a little bit about the medication, the diagnosis, and how we use our language and how we just approach people in general. We should never, like I said, judge. Get to know the person and ask questions. We shouldn't be shy anymore. We should ask more. And there was one thing that you did, and you've mentioned in passing, just sorry to sum up something else. It's having that quiet space and having the courage to leave the room and, as you said, self-regulate and come back. And all workplaces, all schools should have that as a baseline starting point to help that person cope in life.
Yeah, do you know, on that point, I actually find I go to the bathroom, and I've always done that. I've just gone to the bathroom. I've done some breath work. I've just sat. Sometimes I'll just hold the toilet's wall and I just ground, because I feel like I'm spiraling and it's too much overstimulation in the room. And you know, the reality is I'm going to the bathroom because there isn't a room where I can go. So it's going, actually, can we create spaces? And I know places like airports are starting to create sensory rooms.
Yes.
At our events, we hosted an event recently. We created a sensory room with different senses, so light, sound, everything. And for me, it's about creating spaces and also acknowledging that it's okay to do that and not going, oh God, they're obviously slacking off and just chilling out. I'm going to be better if you let me self-regulate. I'm going to give my best self if you allow me to be self-aware and do what I need to do to get back on track. Because what I can do in 4 hours is, I'm telling you now, people, my staff go to me, how the hell have you done all of that? And I'm like, because I'm hyper-focused and I'm really excited about this project. But if you don't let me do my self-regulation, you don't give me the right environment, I'm not going to get that hyper-focus. So you're never going to get the benefits, as it were, out of the neurodivergent way of thinking if you don't offer the support when they're struggling. And I think that's a really important message to send to people listening.
Yeah. And it's an easy ask. And come to Thrive Law. You can come to the companies and help everybody that's listening to speak to their bosses and make amendments.
Exactly.
But small things, small starts, doesn't have to be very costly. It's just consideration, and it works. And it works in tenfold. The rewards is endless.
Thank you.
No, thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening, and we look forward to having another talk maybe later in the year. It would be awesome.
Amazing. Thank you.
Continue being the champion you are. Thank you, Jodie.
Thank you.
Bye for now. Bye-bye.